Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2024 virtual tour where we are talking to Washington State candidates who are running for office this year. I'm Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of Washington and Conservative Ladies of America, and I'm excited to be joined tonight by Dale Whitaker, who is the Republican candidate for Secretary of State. He is endorsed by the Washington State GOP, as well as I think most of the counties that I've seen around the state. I had the pleasure of meeting Dale and his lovely wife in Benton County at the Benton County Lincoln Day dinner a few weeks ago. And I was very excited by Dale's just knowledge of kind of what is needed for this position and his energy. I think it's fun to have, and I don't know, and we'll get into this here in a minute, but I wasn't aware of Dale until a few weeks ago and this election cycle when he kind of came on the scene, at least as far as my knowledge. So I'm excited to learn more about Dale and for you guys to learn more about Dale. And we will be taking live questions from the chat. So if you've got a question that you want to ask, please drop it in the chat and I'll be going through that. But Dale, welcome. I want to kick off with tell me about you. Tell me about your kind of your professional, personal, whatever information you feel like sharing about you personally. And then after that, I'll ask you about your campaign.
Yeah, so I'm actually British. I moved here in 2008 and I became a citizen in 2015. My wife and I both have small businesses here in Spokane. I have a small tax practice. She has a cleaning business. So we see, the impact that increased fees from Secretary of State's office, DOL, and that kind of thing, or having on folks. One of the big reasons for getting involved in this race specifically is because I believe that I have a skill set that I can apply here. So for the last 16 years, I've been working in as an accountant, for the last 10 in executive positions. And in 2018, I found out that the company I was working for were defrauding our customers, and I actually quit my job on with no backup plan or anything like that. I quit my job on principle, filed CFTC and SEC complaints against that company for doing that. And in fact, I was actually a large part of a Washington Post article that went front page last year. So that was really big. I've been working on that issue for a long, long time. So that was really good to get some information out there about that. That's a big thing that I'm working on as well outside of running for Secretary of State. So my business acumen, I think, really speaks for itself. If you look at what I've done, what I've accomplished in the accounting world, I'm an IRS enrolled agent. That doesn't mean that I work for the IRS. That means that I actually represent folks on their behalf with the IRS. So it's like a CPA, except for it's just solely focused on tax. And we need some fresh eyes and ears and a fresh look at the Secretary of State's office, not by career politicians, but by folks who have actually done things in the private sector and can apply good skill sets to the Secretary of State's office. So that's really in large part why I decided to run.
Now, have you been involved in politics prior to this?
Yeah, so in 2015, I became a citizen and I voted in every election except for one primary when my wife and I were actually visiting family back in the UK. But I started really paying attention in 2016 when Bernie Sanders was talking about universal health care. I come from a country that has been bankrupted 3 times. Then it's just been bankrupted at least 3 times. It might have been more since I've moved to the States. But I that scared the living daylights out of me. So I said, we don't want that here, and I started
Right.
really paying attention. So through that process and through some folks that I know, I got involved with a local PAC called We Believe We Vote that surveys candidates from a constitutional and biblical perspective. So I got involved there. I was actually just really helping out, delivering signs and things like that. But as time went on, they offered me a board position, and then when the executive director resigned, she asked if she put my name forward and felt that I'd be a good fit. So I did that for the last 2.5 years. And then when I decided to run, I had to resign from that position, obviously, to fulfill the needs of running a statewide campaign. So I have been politically involved locally, not at a statewide level, but that's changing, as you could see with me traveling the state. So
Yeah, and you are getting around the state, which I think is really awesome. It's cool to see. I follow you on X, and so I see your pictures, and I mean, you are on the west side, on the east side. So that is no small feat. So well done on that. And you've got how many candidates are running for Secretary of State?
So there are four of us. There's myself, Steve Hobbs, Marquise Tiggs, and Damon Townsend.
Okay. Um, and you're the only Republican, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about I know that a lot of people are really interested in this particular position. The Secretary of State oversees the elections. And there are a lot of Washington citizens who are rightfully concerned about the elections process. And I know that's a big issue on your campaign. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I voted for the first time in 2004, which I'm sure you've heard about. You weren't in the States at this time, but I'm sure you've heard about the infamous Dino Rossi
Mm-hmm.
Gregoire election when there were 3 recounts and finally she won on the third recount. And this was my first time voting. And then I didn't vote again until 2016.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I was so disenfranchised and I was so upset with the way that the vote was was handled. And I said, I think I was like, I don't know, 26 or 27 at the time. And I said, well, my vote doesn't count. Why should I vote? They just count the votes until they get the result they want. So I'm not playing this game. And then in 2016, I voted only for Trump. So
None
I've
of the
come a
down
long
ballot
way.
races at all.
What's that?
You didn't vote for any down
I
ballot races
didn't.
at all.
I didn't
Okay.
know anything locally. All I knew was Trump. I wasn't at all engaged in politics, so you can see how far I've come.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are like me who voted in that 2004 election, and some of them still haven't voted because they think their vote doesn't count. And I know that election integrity and security is a big part of your campaign. So can you talk a little bit about your campaign and what your focus is for this position?
Yeah, so my entire focus is to actually do exactly what you're talking about, and that it's reinstilling faith in the electorate that the system itself isn't broken, because it's our fundamental civic duty, and it is a duty to vote. We should all be voting in every election. It's the one thing we can all do that costs us nothing but a little bit of time. And so for me, when I see voter apathy increasing and I see that folks are disenfranchised, I look at that and I go, this cannot happen. We absolutely need to make sure that we have people showing up to the ballot box that and make sure that they don't feel like they're disenfranchised, to make sure that they know that when they vote, their vote isn't going to be canceled by a dead vote, or that there are no people voting that ought not be voting. So for me, it's not even really fundamentally about whether or not 2020 was stolen or 2016 it was stolen. The Dems said it in 2016, Republicans said it in 2020. So for me, I think that's a side issue. The glaring issue for me is that there are enough people that believe that and are convinced of it, that they just won't vote now. And that is a scary prospect, because what ends up happening is an entire section of the electorate stop showing up to vote. And before you know it, we have an autocracy. So my thing is to wake up the electorate and let them know we got to overload the ballot boxes. We
Yep.
got to make sure that people are voting. And you got to vote your conscience, and you got to vote for the candidates you think are going to do the best job. So that's my entire premise for my campaign. It's just been like, look, it doesn't matter if you believe that 2020 or 2016 or whatever is stolen. What matters is the here and now and what we're going to do about it going forward. We absolutely must move forward united so that we can get good folks elected that are actually going to open doors and shine the light on the things that are broken and say, guys, this is what's broken. This is how we're going to fix it. and allow people to come into that process. So for me, that's a large motivator, that I say, look, I have a skill set that I believe I can apply to this office. We can do rigorous audits after every election, which should be being done.
Mhm.
They're not being done to the extent, in my opinion, that they need to be done. So we're going to focus on that. We're going to focus on giving assurance to the electorate that, guys, our elections in Washington State are good. You can show up, and it is worth your 30 minutes to fill out your ballot and take it to the ballot box.
Yeah, one of the things I hear all the time from people is I'm not voting until they go back to mail-in ballots. And I tell people we aren't going to get back to mail-in the only way we get back to mail-in ballots, or I'm sorry, in-person voting, is to vote our way out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to do like a 2016 Trump thing where there's just a huge volume of voters turning out to vote, and we can actually pick up some Republican wins. And only by picking up Republican wins can we go back to in-person voting. And so that's something that I try to talk about as much as I can when I hear from really disenfranchised voters. So it sounds like you're saying the exact same thing. We have to overwhelm the system.
Correct. Yeah. The only way you can even have a shot at winning is if you turn up. So
Right.
if you don't turn, yeah, it's like the lottery. You'll never win the lottery by not buying a ticket. Now, I'm not encouraging people to go buy a lottery ticket, but what I'm saying is you're not gonna win if you don't play. So we have to get people to show up to the ballot box and drop their ballots off. Look,
Yep.
I understand the propensity for distrust with the mail system. I get it. I've never mailed my ballot. I always take it to the ballot box myself. So I just encourage folks, just go to the ballot box yourself. And I know it's hard for some people because there are people that have disabilities and so on, which is what absentee ballots were originally intended for.
Right.
But if you can't take it, give it to someone that you trust, right? And let them take it. Ballot harvesting isn't illegal in Washington State. So we need to start playing the Dems at their own game. We need to start showing up and getting involved and talking to our neighbors and saying, look, if you don't want to take it and you don't want to take the time to fill it out, or if you can at least take the time to fill it out, if you don't want to take it, I'll take it for you. Right. Obviously with
Yep.
their permission. So we absolutely must start doing what we need to do to win, insofar that we're not cheating. There should be no cheating and no one should ever commit election fraud, obviously. So we absolutely have to start showing up.
You know, someone mentioned this to me the other day, and I thought it was such a great idea having ballot parties. Like, you know, you invite your friends and your neighbors over to your house, and we're all going to fill out our ballots together. That way, like, if you have neighbors or family members that they don't know which candidates to vote for, you know, you make it kind of a fun event and get everybody together to fill out their ballots. And
Yeah.
then, you know, you, the host, can collect all the ballots and take them to the drop box or, you know, to your county auditor and turn them in. But that's kind of I guess, a form of ballot harvesting, so to speak. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anything that you can do to encourage your neighbors to vote, I think we absolutely need to do. My dad, actually, I talk about him quite a lot on the campaign trail because I had a conversation with him probably about a year ago now. And I just asked him when the last time it was that he voted. And my dad's 60. And he says, I'm not sure. And I said, well, guess. And he said, I don't know, maybe in college. That was 40 years
wow.
ago.
Wow.
40 years ago. And that happens because if you talk to my dad, he says, all politicians are the same. It's all rigged, blah, 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 blah. So we know that this narrative exists and has existed for decades upon decades upon decades upon decades. This is nothing new. It's just that if you dare question the authority of the current Secretary of State, for example, they put you in a report and say that you're this, putting out misinformation and disinformation. It's like, look, people are entitled to believe whatever they want. So I've worked on my dad to tell him like, hey, nothing's ever going to change if you don't show up. So
Right.
he's still a work in progress for me. He's obviously in the UK, but that just tells you that that's where we're headed, because it's not just him. I don't know any of my family members that go vote. I don't know any of them.
Wow.
There's not one that I know in my family aside from myself and my wife and obviously my stepkids. I don't know any of them that vote. Whenever we try to talk to them about it, they just no interest. All politicians are the same. It's all rigged, et cetera, et cetera. We have to dispel that. And the only
Yes.
way to do that, in my opinion, is by being transparent.
Yes, I totally agree with you on that. I don't know if so with Conservative Ladies of Washington, we are very focused on legislation and tracking legislation and educating citizens and taking action to make our voices heard on policy that's going through Olympia. There have been just in the 3 sessions that I've been involved in watching legislation, there have been numerous election bills that have gone through that have helped to advance the um, I guess what I would say the concerns for people who have issues with the elections systems, the security and the transparency. Have you kind of dug into some of that legislation in the last few years? And is there anything that you could do about it, or maybe just having, someone that's concerned about, the security and transparency would be an improvement in that office?
Yeah, so I've read as much as I could possibly read at this point while on the campaign trail. I'm still reading. The reality is that a lot of these things are done over time. Like you said, there's been a bill every session,
Yep.
and it's just a little bit here, a little bit there, where it's like do this, do this, do this, and we can fix this and fix this and fix this. At some point, we have to realize that the system is broken. We got to look at it from the ground up and go, what do we need to actually fix? Because it seems like we're putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound, and it isn't helping.
Right.
I think one of the things we can do is get rid of motor voter. I think if we get rid of automatic voter registration, it takes a huge amount of weight off the Secretary of State's office. It doesn't stifle accessibility. If folks want to register to vote, they can go to the Secretary of State's website. It's a heck of a lot easier to go to the Secretary of State's website than it is to go to your DMV. I mean, the fact that people say, "Oh, well, that's a barrier to entry." It's like, so you're saying, well, hold on, are you saying people cannot find the DMV, or are you saying they can't find the Secretary of State's website? I mean, it's just kind of a very weird dynamic argument that they try to use to say that we're stifling votes. That's not true. People can use their email. They use their phones all the time. Everyone has one, regardless of race, creed, or color. Everyone has a cell phone and can find the Secretary of State's office and register to vote if they want to.
Right.
By registering people automatically, you don't get any, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to even cast their ballot. All it guarantees is they get a ballot in the mail and they go, where'd this come from? I didn't sign up for this thing, right?
Right.
So I think in a way it actually creates more confusion because they're going, I didn't sign up for this. So motor vote is one good way to really help with cleaning up the voter rolls. But the other thing too is Eric isn't working, in my opinion, as intended. It isn't as good a system. You should not have to be subverting your part of your duties to a third party nonprofit and giving all the voter registration data to a third party. Um, I don't care what the contract looks like. We don't know what they're doing with the data. So I really don't care if that contract says they'll never disclose the data to anyone. We don't know, and we can't guarantee that. The only way we can guarantee that is by keeping that information in-house and keeping that voter registration data private, as it should be. That's part of
Yes.
the duties of the Secretary of State's office. The duty isn't, well, you're going to handle this, and the way that you handle this is to give that duty to a third party. It's no, you handle this in house. This is the most fundamental part of your job as Secretary of State. So, abolishing Eric, bringing that back in house, cleaning the voter rolls effectively, and working on reining in the motor voter laws, hopefully overturning them at some point. There's a lot of work to do. There's an absolute lot of work to do to get us to a point where I feel like the disenfranchised voter can go, okay, now I feel safe to go and vote and know that my votes and voice is going to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely there is a lot of work to do to start earning back that trust. Um, but it sounds like you have a really good plan, and I like that. You are really concerned about getting in there and looking at some of these issues that have been going on for quite a long time. We did a poll. We started it this morning. It'll run for 24 hours, but about election um, concerns for 2024, and of the choices were what is your greatest concern surrounding elections in 2024? And the options were non-citizens voting, transparency in the process, security, fraud and interference, voter suppression, and accessibility. And it probably won't surprise you that 60% of the respondents said security was their biggest issue. And that included fraud and interference. And then the second one at 33% is non-citizens voting. And we know that non-citizens voting in Washington is a big issue because the party in power is very they want non-citizens to vote. And so I guess I would say, I'm sure those results don't surprise you at all because you're hearing from citizens around the state. And so I'm sure that you hear that a lot. Um, as far as the fraud and security, with an interference with the elections, um, what I guess what are your thoughts to addressing that?
Yeah. Well, for again, this goes back to motor voter. If we abolish automatic voter registration, then we solve that problem, not automatically, but I think you reduce it by a good 90%. And then those folks who are registering to vote, being non-citizens, would have to really go out of their way to do so. And then the intent is clear at that point. The issue is that a non-citizen goes in to get a, let's say, like for example, when I was a green card holder and I had to go in to get my driver's license, I had to prove residency. So the first thing that they asked for is, we want a utility bill, credit card bill, something with your name on it that establishes that you are a resident here. Because I was still waiting for my green card and I was still going through that process, but I was eligible for a driver's license. So I said, okay, so got my name on a utility bill because my wife and I were living together. So just, that was easy. So, but it was still a barrier and a healthy one, because that meant that I had to actually go out of my way and make a concerted effort. Well, then when I actually went to register to get my driver's license, I didn't get automatically registered. There was a question there that says, "Would you like to register to vote?" And I said, "No," because I knew it wasn't my right. So, but what's happening now is the DOL are being instructed to automatically register them, check the box yes, and then have
Mhm.
them fill out the voter registration form. There are a lot of good folks that are here illegally, that are here honestly seeking asylum, that do not want to vote because they understand that it is not their right. So it does a disservice to the folks that are coming here and genuinely want to be good citizens in the future, when they're basically being intentionally coerced into breaking the law. Now, the law isn't broken until they cast a ballot, but if they receive one in the mail and they're confused, they'll just fill it out.
Right.
Heard a story from the West Side where there was actually a gentleman who was in a panic because he'd received a ballot and he didn't, and they wouldn't. He went there and they got a translator, tried to have him taken off the voter rolls, and they just wouldn't help him. So he actually had reached out to one of the GOPs and said, "I need help. These guys aren't doing it." So for me, stories like that where you see the genuine care from folks who are trying to come to the United States to live a better life and are wanting to do things the right way, are scared to death because they want to be a citizen at some point. And if they cast that ballot, it is a crime.
Right.
So we absolutely have to get our hands wrapped around motor voter. Once we do that, like I said, I think if we can rein that in and get that back to a point of common sense, I think that we will see a mass reduction in voter registrations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that that is definitely the biggest kind of the weakest link as far as registering, non-citizens to be able to vote. Um, I want to kind of circle back. You kind of made mention of it, to the Logically AI, and what is currently being used by the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs. Can you tell people what Logically AI is and what it's being used for?
Yeah, Logically AI is a foreign intelligence firm, actually British intelligence firm that the current Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, has contracted with by way of circumventing the bid process by giving one of the community colleges a contract, basically, and giving them 15% of the contract value to engage with Logically AI. That's essentially what it is. Now, what they're doing is they are surveilling all of social media posts, and to take it a step further, all the newspapers as well. So if you go to, for example, a Seattle Times article, and you scroll down and you go to their comments, if they see things even in those comments, they're taking screenshots and they're reporting it back to Steve Hobbs to dispel election narratives. And I have to do the quotes because it's just
Yep.
ridiculous. Election narratives, disinformation, and misinformation. I was on a call today with the Seattle Times editorial board. They're working on their endorsement for Secretary of State. And this came up, and actually, credit to Seattle Times, they actually pushed on this quite hard. And so they should, because this affects their ability to do their job as a media outlet. So this came up, and Steve Hobbs said, look, 35% of the electorate when I took office had no faith in the electoral process. It's like, okay. So my question back to Steve was, Steve, do you think that as the chief elections officer in the state of Washington, knowing that 35% of the folks distrust the elections, that the solution to giving them more trust and instilling trust in them is to surveil them on social media? I'm like that. Those two things don't jive for me. I think that you actually have the exact opposite effect to what your intent is. I think your outcomes are way off
Right.
based on what your actions are. So he doubled down and just goes, yes, because then we can go out and educate people on X, Y, Z. And I'm like, well, maybe some people don't want to be educated. That's first and foremost, and that's their right. And secondly, people are entitled to their opinion. So for you to state that 35% distrust it, and therefore my solution is to surveil them so that I can educate them better, how about you actually just open the office and be more transparent? How about that? How about we let the county auditors know that you can't tell your election observers to stand back 50 feet behind a resin, what are the shield or whatever those things
Yeah.
are, right? I mean, how about you let them do their jobs and observe? And listen, I know that anecdotally there are some election observers that get feisty and testy, but that doesn't happen en masse. And most people want to work together to ensure that the elections processes are good. And so for us to take anecdotes and say that every election observer is that way, I think it does a disservice to everyone, and it builds distrust or not trust. I think the way we reach across the aisle on these issues is we let those folks go and do their job. Everyone needs to be nice to each other, but the election observers need to be able to do their job when they're seeing things come up, and they need to be able to say, look, that didn't look right. Can we take a look at that? Instead, there's stuff going by at a million miles an hour, and they're never able to intervene. Now, you have to have just cause to intervene, but when there is, it should be taken seriously. So there's a lot to do there, but logically is a very dangerous tool, in my opinion. And it's again, it is not Steve Hobbs's job. That's a mouthful. It's not Steve Hobbs's job to surveil folks and determine
Right.
what is accurate and what isn't accurate. If there's truly a threat to national security, like he said in the Seattle Times interview today, then Let the DHS do their job, right? Refer it to the FBI, but you shouldn't have a company surveilling the citizens of this country and this state because you feel like it's your duty. That's absolutely unacceptable to me. It violates his oath of office, and it violates our First Amendment right.
Absolutely. And, I think people need to know that this is, I've been in these logically reports to the Secretary of State's office and a number of other people that I follow on X, Washington, I don't even know if I would call them activists, just concerned citizens. And these are pretty just benign social media posts of citizens just voicing their concerns about the elections process. And it's not, it's nothing crazy or tinfoil hat type of posts. It's really just people asking questions. And that's concerning that when you are just, making observations or asking questions, that you're showing up in a report to the Secretary of State.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it absolutely is ridiculous. We know that there have been requests to take down Facebook posts and so on.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just look, the minute that I get elected Secretary of State, I'm going to tear the contract up. It's that simple. And that was one thing. That was actually one of the questions the Seattle Times editorial board asked today was, if you are elected Secretary of State, they asked the question to everyone, would you continue on with the Logical AI contract? Steve Hobbs is like, yeah, well, absolutely. Of course I'm going to, because my buddies are the ones that are running it. That's really what it comes down to.
Right.
And Marquise Tiggs and Damon Townsend said, well, I don't know what's in the contract. I don't care what's in the contract, guys. The Secretary of State is violating his oath of office and the First Amendment. That contract, even if it costs $250,000, that thing is being shredded. I don't care, because the reality is taxpayer money should not be used to fund and surveil taxpayers. That's not what I'm there for. If I want to instill trust in the electorate, I don't do that by spying on them. I do that by entertaining them and listening to what their concerns are and giving them evidence to the contrary of whatever it is that they may believe. It's that simple. This isn't a complex issue. It's very black and white. So as you can tell, it really fires me up, because I come from a country, the First Amendment does not exist.
Right.
In my country, in the United Kingdom, I shouldn't say my country. This is my country, so I want to be clear. And where I'm from, in the United Kingdom,
yes,
my other country, where the reality is, let me tell you this story. This is how crazy it is. There was a teenage girl. This is a few years ago now. She's probably not a teenager anymore. I think she was 13, 14 at the time, and she was listening to some rap song on the radio. And it doesn't matter how you feel about rap music. Let's just say you love it, hate it, doesn't matter. She took the lyrics verbatim from a lyric website and posted the lyrics verbatim to her Facebook page. And she went to jail for hate speech, because the rap song had the N-word in it, and she posted it on her Facebook page. Now, should you be posting on your Facebook? It doesn't matter. What matters is she went to jail for hate speech. That is a crime. And there's thousands of cases. This is just one anecdotal case, but there's thousands of these in the United Kingdom that happen all the time. There was a comedian that was famously locked up a few years ago, that Scottish guy. He was locked up. Doesn't matter what you feel about what he said, did, or whatever. The reality is that is dangerous, because then you feel like you lose your voice in society. And so for me, the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason.
Yes.
Right? It is the most fundamental part of our republic, and we absolutely must fight to keep it.
I 100% agree. And I'm sure you're well aware of the hate crime hotline bill. I think it's Senate Bill 5427 that passed this year. And people can call this hate crime hotline and report somebody that said something they didn't like. I mean, and that
They
is
get paid for it, right? Don't they get paid for it?
That was in the original bill. They did end up taking
they
out
amend
the
it?
$2,000 payout, but what I tell people is they might have taken it out to get it passed this year, but you can bet that $2,000 cash reward is going to come back. If not in 2025, it'll come back in 2026, but it will be back. They will add it back. But that's like what you're saying is, I mean, that's an unconstitutional piece of legislation that passed and is signed into law. And so that I say that to let people know that this these Democrats that are in power in Washington, they don't care if something is constitutional or not. And so it's really important that we are electing people that do take their oath of office and their oath to uphold not only the state of Washington Constitution, but the United States Constitution. That is extremely important. And if we aren't going to have elected officials that view those as sacred documents and that is their duty to uphold those, I mean, what do we have? I mean, we lose our country. I mean, that's what's really special about the United States. I mean, obviously you came here and became a citizen here because it is special, and we have these very special freedoms that other countries do not have. It's not perfect, but
Well, this is how special it is. So I haven't spoke much about this. I've been invited to give a speech on July 4th. And this is going to be part of that speech, but this is not something that I've really touched on a lot. So if you're watching, this is the first time really that I've said this publicly, but I actually grew up in George Washington's family town. And there is the part of their family history is rooted in the town, in the village that I grew up in the United Kingdom. So you guys can look this up. It's called Washington Old Hall, and I used to walk by it every day on my way to high school. And if you go there now, it's now a national museum. So you go there now, it's completely littered with everything to do with George Washington. The town I'm from is called Washington, Tyne and Weir. So look it up,
wow.
Washington Old Hall. His George Washington's family crest is my the village's is the village's flag, I guess you could say. And so that's just how important it is. It's so important that there is a town that he is from that is honoring George Washington and his family to this day in the United Kingdom, and really honoring that he is part of the founding fathers of this nation.
Yeah, that's
So
so cool.
it's really it's an awesome museum. I took my stepdaughter there. In fact, the school wasn't happy that we were going to go. So when my wife and I got married in 2016, we took a month and we went to the UK to visit family, and then we went to Israel and went to Italy. Just kind of this little trip, and the school weren't happy. We were taking my stepdaughter out of school, so I said, "Well, let's get a project together. There's this great place, and she could do a report on it." So that's what we did. We took her there. The tour guide took us around. She took a bunch of pictures and did this report on Washington Old Hall for her school as part of her curriculum. So anyway, the point being is what we have is special, and it is
Mhm.
worth fighting for. And violating your oath of office is not something to be snickered at. It is absolutely important. It's so important, in fact, that when you file to run for office in Washington State, Jim Walsh actually tweeted this the day that filings opened. There is a prompt that says, "This is your oath of office," and you ought to stand by that.
That's very cool. And are you able to say where you're giving the speech so people can come see you, or is it going to be
Yeah,
on
it's
video?
in Dayton, the city of Dayton, on the west side, southwest side. So
Okay,
as we get closer, I'm going to start announcing it on my Twitter and Facebook
cool.
and all that good stuff. Yeah.
And I've got your website on the screen for everybody, whitakerforwa.com. So please, if you don't have to do it right now while we're on video, but please take that down, copy that, go visit the site, learn more about Dale on his website, and most importantly, please make a financial contribution to the campaign. It's really important. These candidates need your financial support. Um, it's I can't overstate that. And so I know you have something, you have a pop up on your screen um, when people go to your website. Is it something about like $50 or
It's like
five
it's
people?
just a it's if it's on exit. So if you go to exit and you haven't donated, we kind of harass you a little bit because $5 can go a long way. You know,
It can.
it's less than a coffee now because twenty
Yep.
percent inflation. Thanks, Joe Biden. But
Yep.
it's less than a coffee now. So but it can go a long way. It goes a long way in many forms. You know, like the rack cards. I give a bunch of these away. People are constantly asking for these. These are like 9 cents a piece. So if you think that $5 won't go a long way, it can print a heck of a lot of these for me. So,
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
and so, please, just whatever you guys can give, it does go a very long way.
Yes. So please head over to whitakerforwa.com and make a donation, please, and share that with all of your friends. So on that note, you are running a statewide campaign, which is no small feat. So what kind of help do you need? Do you have volunteers? I mean, I'm sure you have volunteers. Do you need volunteers? What kind of help can people who are watching this video what can they do for you? How can they contribute to your campaign besides just donating financially?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we need help with: phone banking, canvassing, if that's something you're interested in. If you're not comfortable doing those things, sending text messages to your friend. We're actually, if you go to my website under volunteer and get involved, we are using an app called Swipe Red, which is a friend to friend messaging system. The campaign generates the types and the copy, so you don't have to think of like, oh well, what do I say about this guy or whatever. We put that together for you, and all you have to do is hit share, and then you can share it to all of your contacts. It's a very effective way of actually getting the word out about candidates, because friends are more likely, actually 9 times more likely, to listen to friends than to, we are going to send text, but then to get a random text message from a phone number about a candidate. So that's really important. If you can order a yard sign, get a yard sign. Those are really good to have, just for continued name recognition. And then if you are interested in being involved at a deeper level, we are looking for folks in every county that can really get involved and be a point of contact, distribute material for us, network, set up meet and greets. There's a ton of things that people can do within their wheelhouse too. What I like to tell people is, don't sign up to do something that you're not comfortable doing. So if you don't like phone banking and talking on the phone, don't do it. But if you're comfortable with getting, 10, 20, 30 people in your house and hosting a meet and greet, let's do that. Right? Let's get me in front of the folks that that might be comfortable doing it. So there's a whole lot of things to do. If you go to my website, you'll see it on there under get involved, all of the different things that you can do. So if there's something that appeals to you, please sign up, and we'll reach back out to you, and we'll get something going.
That's awesome. And when I first started Conservative Ladies of Washington as a Facebook group, it was 2020, so it was during COVID, and uh, you know, people weren't able to go to work. They weren't, kids weren't going to school, and so people are really craving that interaction. And so, kind of, we started with just like having these gatherings where people could have in person gatherings and meet other people. And I know just within our membership now, we have just ladies that love to gather and, have social events. And so I would tell, our members and any of our members that are watching, please consider, having a gathering at your home, or, if you have like a local, especially on the West Side, there's a lot of, I suppose on the east side too, a lot of these wineries now have these big tasting rooms, and you can, rent out the place for, just a case of wine, a great opportunity to host an event for people to come and meet you and talk to you and learn about your campaign. So I would encourage people to get involved in that way. Um, so you are just kind of at this point traveling the state, wherever you're asked to be, it looks like is where you're
Mhm.
going.
Yeah. So I just ask that if I'm going to make a trip across the state, you can guarantee that you'll get 40 or 50 people in a room, and I'll be there. I want to talk to everyone. I want to get in front of as many folks as possible and let them know that there is someone on the ballot that is concerned about the voter apathy in this state, and that we're going to do something about it.
And let me ask you, it sounds like with the Seattle Times thing that you did today, you that was inclusive of the other three candidates as
Mhm.
well. What would you say sets you apart from are all the other three they're all Democrats?
So Damon Townsend is running as no labels. He was
Okay.
worked at the Pierce County Auditor's Office or something like that, I think. And then Marquise Tiggs and Steve Hobbs are the Democrats. Yeah.
So what would you say sets you apart from is kind of the big distinguishing thing about you apart from the other three?
I'm the only one that has an established business acumen behind me, and as an accountant, has the experience needed. Damon Townsend actually is. I think he has an accounting degree, but he's never worked in the public sector. And I think it's important that when you're running for public office, that only the only jobs that you've held are in the public realm, I think that that isn't a good thing. I think that it over time you kind of get into these bubbles and you don't really realize how the real world
Yes.
operates. And so I think that's a huge factor for me when going in there. I know how to build efficient systems. I know how to build policies that are effective, and I know how to run large teams. And I know how to do it that really builds a good sense of community within in the office of Secretary of State. Because the reality is, the more that you run the office like a good efficient business, the more we'll be able to save money and put money back into the taxpayers' pockets by way of reducing charities and corporation fees, reducing annual fees, and so on. That's a big part of what I think sets me apart. The other thing that sets me apart is I don't have all the noise. Damon Townsend, Steve Hobbs being from the public sector, I don't have a lot of noise in my head about what we can and cannot do. I think you tend to get boxed in and go, well, we can do this, we can't do that. Now, obviously, there are certain things that cannot be accomplished without legislation. But I think that coming out from an outside perspective and really looking at these issues and going, these are the issues that can be solved, and reaching across the aisle and getting to know the people in the legislature to make those changes, um, and just being loud and proud when I get there and be like, look, guys, these are the things that need to be fixed. This is how we're going to fix it. We're going to put this in front of the legislature, and if they don't fix it, then we're going to make a lot of noise about it, right? So just being bold. I think that's a big part of it too.
I think that you are a really exciting candidate because of the fact that you are not a career politician, and because you have this sort of you seem to have this creative, out of the box thinking about you, which I think is needed in government on all levels of government. And just someone that's not sort of in that, like you said, in that public sector bubble, which is most career politicians and many candidates. A lot of candidates are um, what I would consider like sort of career candidates. They're if there's a ballot, they're on it. They
Yeah,
maybe have never held office, but they're always on the ballot.
yeah.
um,
Yeah, and it's honestly, I have no intention of being a career politician. I'm not doing this because I want to run for governor in 10, 12, 15 years. That's not my intent. My intent is I have a skill set I know I can apply to the Secretary of State's office and I can be effective. That's my whole intent for running. And if in 8 years, let's say I run 2 terms and there's another guy, I'll be into my 40s by then, mid 40s. And if there's another young buck like me that comes along and says, hey, I have these good ideas and I think that that's a good fit, and I think that my time is done, then I'll gladly say, look, we've got some good options that are running, and I'll gladly step down and go work back in the private sector where you can actually make some money. So I'm not doing this as a resume patter. I'm not doing this for any other reason other than there are problems that are solvable, and I have a skill set that I believe can be applied and can solve these issues.
I love that, and I believe that that is what our founding fathers had in mind with government, is that people like yourself would come out of the private sector to do a job, to do what they could to fix a problem, and then they would get out and go back to, doing whatever they were doing before. So
Yep.
I think that's really cool. I love that you're young. I love your energy. I really hope that you will be the next Secretary of State. I think you're doing an amazing job campaigning, and we will do Conservative Ladies is behind you 100%. We'll do whatever we can to support your campaign and to get the momentum going behind you as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me with anything that we can do to help you. But as we close tonight, is there anything that you would like to say to people, or anything that I forgot to ask you that you want to make sure that you get out there?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for your support. If you're watching this live or you're watching this later, please, please share this with your friends. The
Yes.
again, 9 times more impactful when it comes from a friend. So please share this with your friends, and just remember to continue to pray for not just my race, but the races across the state. There's a lot of us working hard. I'm in contact with David Olson and with Pete Serrano almost, if not daily, every other day. We're really working hard together to cross network and so on. Share it with your friends and just continue to pray, because we absolutely need it. And pray for our wives and
Absolutely.
husbands too, for the ladies that are out there too, because it is very hard on spouses. And my wife, honestly, I couldn't do this without my wife enabling me to do it. So we absolutely need your prayers, your support, whether that's financially or by just spreading the word. So those are the real big key things that you guys could do that don't really take a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just want to echo that. I mean, prayer is huge. We are in a spiritual battle for our nation, for our state. And I just also want to add, your wife is lovely. She's my little bestie. That I looked like a teenager, so she and I are gonna be tight forever. But yes, I can imagine that this is hard on the spouses as well. So, do please keep these candidates and their spouses and their children in your prayers. Um, and gosh, Dale, I just appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. And we will be spreading this link on replay all throughout the primary and throughout your campaign season. And so we'll do everything that we can to help spread the word. And I just want to say thank you for stepping up to run. I know it's not an easy thing to do. I know it's very time consuming, and I can really tell that you have a servant's heart. So thank you for being willing to do this for Washington, and I'm really excited that you're doing it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I do believe in serving. In fact, um, the Bible teaches he who is first must be last. So
Right.
if we are going to lead, we must serve. So yeah.
Amen. Well, thank you. God bless you, and wishing you much success and victory
Appreciate it.
in this election.
Thank you.